Welcome back to the podcast. This episode's first minute has some bad audio. We were outside in the wind, the storm was approaching, and so it's a little bumpy, but after that first minute, everything settles down, and we hope you enjoy what we think is one of our best episodes about The Farewell.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Racking Focus podcast. I'm Josiah Blizzard.
And I'm John Doyle, and we're here at the AMC Theater in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania, to see The Farewell.
I know almost nothing about this movie, have no expectations other than it was distributed by A24, I believe, and they've been putting out amazing things. So I have no expectations. I'm genuinely just excited to see this movie.
So can you tell me what your favorite kind of, or your favorite Asian piece of Asian cinema is?
No, because there's not a whole lot of it, and it's nice that there's finally some like Americanized, like Hollywood, not something,
right.
Not like a Hong Kong film, right? Like
right.
There's English, American, Asian films being made, Crazy Rich Asians in the last year, and now this. So I think I can answer that question for you in like 2 or 3 years, probably.
Okay, that's great. I can say this about this particular film, as it feels parallel in some ways to Crazy Rich Asians, which is about sort of returning to some kind of cultural roots.
Right.
And that seems like a good place for this cinema in America to start.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of all the kinds of film this isn't. So every kind of imaginable kung fu, gunfighting, whatever, samurai film. So I'm anxious to see this much more thoughtful piece.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's go in and
all right.
Watch.
Let's do it.
You're listening to the Racking Focus podcast.
What's wrong, Dad? Please tell me.
Your Nan is dying.
She doesn't know, so you can't say anything. The family thinks it's better not to tell her.
Why is that better?
Chinese people have saying, when people get cancer, they die. We have to go to China.
Wedding is an excuse so everyone can see her.
He's my only cousin. Did you think I should be there?
You can't hide your emotions. If you go, Nan will find out right away.
Really 啊？咋啦？咋不说话呢？今天人多挤。
So here we are after The Farewell.
I don't know where to start.
I know it's a lot to talk about. So let's start with the easy questions, right? What did you like?
Okay, so there may be spoilers.
Right, there's spoilers.
There's really not a whole lot to spoil, but there are spoilers.
Right, exactly. It'd be better if you saw the film before hearing us talk.
Yes,
right?
yeah. What did I like? I really liked the whole movie.
Okay, good. That's a good start.
There's but specifically, the biggest thing that stood out to me was the music. Yeah, it's like significantly the music.
You soundtrack versus
yes, yeah,
incidental music or soundtrack?
Like soundtrack.
Yeah, a soundtrack. I agree completely.
100%. Well, to me at least, 100% dictated the emotion that was. Just shared the emotion that she was feeling.
Even the words, the text of it was meaningful in the moment.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't appear meaningful in the space.
Yeah. Yeah, the music pretty much outrightly told you how they're feeling, because it's just a lot of them looking, I don't want to say mopey, but like they're in mourning, they're grieving, and it's pretty much one solemn face after another, just they can't believe what they're having to do for their grandmother. And so the music really kind of gives you insight into how they're feeling. That way they don't have to. I mean, this is what I picked up on, at least, was there's a line that was said in the beginning of the movie that said when you tell someone they have cancer, they die.
Right.
And instead of telling their grandmother, the grandmother was full of life, the most lively person in the film.
Indeed.
Right? Because they didn't tell her that she had cancer. Yet everybody else who didn't have cancer but knew the circumstance pretty much was dead on the outside for the entirety of the film. So that it's just the irony of the situation. So the music really helped me at least, understand what everybody was feeling.
And even through to the credits, right? So the song
Yeah.
under the credits is an end piece that speaks very clearly to the
Right.
emotional text of the film. Yeah, I mean, I thought the music was spectacular. Even the music inside the story. So
Yeah.
even when they were singing at
Right,
the
the
wedding
opera
ceremony,
that was being
right,
the
and this,
operatic
you know,
music,
the
yeah.
songs that they're singing, "Killing Me Softly," with this, like perfect music choices, and that also, I thought the incidental music was really interesting too, because it was sparse and highly stylized, and so it allowed that other music to be really well heard. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. What else did you like?
I thought that the composition of the frames
Framings,
was
beautiful.
absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Both the use of negative space in some of those environments, or the choice on how to fill negative space.
Yeah.
There's that moment near the end where the grandmother and the granddaughter Billy are speaking, and in the background on the grandmother's side is the two brothers, and on the other side is her and her husband, and those images are important for us to understand the history.
That was the framing that stood out to me too. Like you were talking about framing, and those were the two shots.
The images that were just beautiful. But the other framing, I would say too, the other moment that it blew me away, like framing that blew me away. It's when Billy comes into the room, and it's not the first time she's there. She's coming into the meal, and the grandmother turns around, Nina, I guess. She turns around to look at her coming back from being in the bathroom.
Yes, yeah.
And she turns around and she's dead center, and she it looks like it's just slightly slowed down, and she turns that into the frame, and so she's dead center, forefront, with the family around behind her.
Yeah.
And then we rotate to that same central placed position with Billy now and grandmother's back and the family here in the foreground. And it was beautiful. The framing on the walk each time someone was walking down the street, with that main character center focus, Billy almost always center focus,
Right.
and what was happening around, they were startlingly beautiful frames. Over and over.
The
and
cinematography
over
was
again.
astounding in the film. The cinematography was beautiful, and if we just disregard what it even meant,
right?
Just the lighting in general, the framing in general, everything was beautiful. But then when you plug it into the story, and what they are doing with the camera, that adds to the story, the camera being another character in a way. I take the framing, that negative space, as like there's just all of this commotion, all of this like almost like weight around her and above them, like on all sides at all times. There's always this weird negative space in some way, and these emotional shots. And even with the framing we were talking about with the family on the wall behind them, this negative space, that family is still filling that space. It's always in the background. It's always in behind the scenes in their heads. Like they're always thinking about family. And they brought up the brother brought up the collectivist society versus the individualistic society, which I wasn't sure if they were going to touch on. It was something that crossed my mind early on in the film, and yeah, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all from a philosophy standpoint, but yeah, like it was a good explanation of what they were doing and how they were thinking about this whole thing for me.
Yeah, I thought over and over again we saw visual images that were like paintings, right?
Yeah.
Like they were beautifully designed. People moved in and out of shots. There were tons of images, There were many images where we had an empty screen, either at the beginning or end of a sequence, that gave us a sense of place and a sense of this waiting, like this painful waiting to decide to tell the truth or not, right? It's funny because it's not a suspense film, right?
No.
But there is a suspense in the background. Will someone
spill the beans, right? Will someone tell her? And going back to those long shots, those long takes, I mean, in the cemetery they kept about, and it was humorous, right, when they were doing it, but it's painful sometimes too to watch, and it made me think of just classic Asian cinema in general, and I think of he's Japanese though, it's Ozu, who is I think he did a Tokyo Story. I think of that one specifically because that movie is so slow and every shot is so long. Like people will come into frame, leave the room, and it'll hang on to that frame, and then they'll come back, and it's just this was like classic long shots Asian cinema at its best, because it's actually helping with the story, right?
It tells the story. That's right.
Yeah. So, and there was a lot of symbolism that I'm like, this is symbolic. I don't know how, but I know it is.
Well, I think that's when we're going to sit down again.
Yeah.
I think those are the things we're going to talk about, or get into our head and look around and see what we find out.
There was a lot of stuff. Another thing I loved was, I loved seeing the culture shown in this film, because China, I don't think like the only movie coming to my mind that really shows Chinese culture in my head, and as a kid growing up watching this movie, was Mulan from Disney. I can't think of another piece of film that I've seen growing up, or even just like recently, that's like, this is sharing the culture in a way that actually connects with me, right? Like, it's one thing if I'm going to go and watch a Chinese or Japanese film and I'm seeing the actual culture take place there in those films, but I don't understand it because it's not relating to the American in me, right? So
this movie does a really nice job keeping the American culture and the Chinese culture in some measure of clarity. Like, we'd spend a lot of time comparing those cultures, even though the majority of the story is in Chinese. And I want to talk a little bit about that too. Just real quickly, because there's two things I want to say. The culture thing was one thing, but before we move there, one of the great risks in a movie that's composed as well as this is that subtitles draw an American eye away from it. And those images were strong enough that those subtitles did not do that at all. It felt like I wanted to luxuriate in the images. But to back to culture real quick, I think so. My wife and I just recently watched Crazy Rich Asians,
right?
And this is almost the antithesis of that.
Did you enjoy
film.
it? Did you enjoy Crazy Rich Asians?
So I enjoyed it fine. It is. I mean, it's a rom-com, right? Like, which is not my favorite style of film. And there's some things about it that I'm uncomfortable with, like as a being in the world. It could get a little. We're gonna hear some noise potentially in the background because it's raining. But aside from that, it's a very pleasurable movie. Like, it's fun to watch, whatever. And we have an actress who trails in both, and
Awkwafina's in both.
She's brilliant in that one, and a comedic role, like really wonderful. But this story is so rich in its sensibility of culture, especially in moving that culture in relationship to American culture. Crazy Rich Asians is about an American in Chinese culture. This movie is about American culture and Chinese culture, along with that American. And what's funny is, they're both going back for a wedding. Like, there's a real strong parallel to me as I'm watching it. But I found that this really told the culture in a way that was richer, was more full. And I thought, too, the choice to make the other son in Japan, and that lovely, like, spectacular Chinese girl who can't understand, or Japanese girl, who she can't understand anyone. Like, she doesn't understand what anyone's saying, and both for comedy purposes and for pathos. It was just really great. And so I thought the cultural stuff was great. I thought the things in the background or the foreground, I thought the eating sequences were so interesting. This is going to be, I can't wait to hear the sound. This is going to be good sound for us.
There was just so much I loved about it. I mean, this is going to be a movie that I buy when it's released.
I would say absolutely.
Like, I think this is a movie I'm going to purchase. Was there anything you didn't like that stands out to you right now that you're like needs to be fixed, or like you wish the pacing was different, or anything like that?
I will say that there was a moment when I was in the theater where I thought the movie felt long. Right, and we said at the beginning it's 1:38, right? And I was like, maybe it's longer than that. Maybe I had that wrong. That doesn't mean I waned in interest. It just means that I felt that that at some point. But I don't know. I think it's hard for me to find a thing I didn't like, because I found that emotionally it was very moving. There were so many.
Sorry, I'm getting rained on. I'm going to close my window.
There's so much to think about. Right? There's so much to reflect on. There's so many images. There's that dream sequence. There's where she sees her grandfather and he disappears in the smoke. There's this sequence with the birds, like the bird in New York, bird in China. To think about that. I feel like if I say there's something I don't like right now, I'm saying it's just something I haven't sufficiently thought about.
Right, you haven't understood it completely. You missed it.
I thought the writing was so strong. and I don't believe there's a lot of improv in this. Maybe there was, but I don't believe there is.
Yeah.
I think that Billie her performance is extraordinary in its beauty. What's the other Ha-Han? The other boy,
How. Yeah.
His performance is spectacular in a crazy role.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, there's really nothing that stands out to me as wrong or poorly done or anything like that. It is an hour and 40 minutes, so it's on the shorter side of a film that's being made today. You don't see many films that are 90 minutes long, pretty much 98 minutes. But it did feel long. Like you said, at one point I was like, this is a long hour and 40 minutes, but purposefully.
I think that's exactly right.
The strain we're feeling of like, okay, when is this going to end? At one point, I thought it ended because it cut to a black screen, and then it cuts to something else, and we continue. But I was okay with it ending at that black screen. Like I said, I nodded my head. I was like, okay, that's right. That's how the movie ends.
This is a thought,
and I'm okay with that. And then it continued for a little bit longer.
And was still beautiful. Like the last moments, the last moments, which echo back to that earlier morning routine sequence, is just beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. And that, but again, like I can't say it because I know it's deliberate, and it wasn't careless. It didn't feel like it needed editing, and it's one of the things I said about the Tarantino film is I feel like he needs an editor sometimes. I feel like he could take 10 minutes off that film and it wouldn't hurt it. It doesn't mean it's bad because of it. This is a movie where I don't feel like that's the case.
The editing was so strong. I thought
really good.
There was and there was times where there was cuts at like in the middle of a word there would be a cut, right? I'm not 100% sure what the motivation was behind that, other than maybe jarring the audience a little bit, or I don't know, just feeling like you're one of the characters and you just completely zone out and forget what's happening because you're stuck in thought about your grandmother dying. Like I don't know what the purpose was, but even still, like there were times where people would leave the frame and it would hold there for a while. And then it would cut to the next thing, and it makes me think of there's one shot in particular in Taxi Driver, where De Niro's character's on the phone, right, and on this payphone, and the camera deliberately leaves him, and stares down this hallway like it doesn't want to look at whatever is being said on the phone. It doesn't even want to acknowledge what's happening over there, and I felt that way in this movie. Like people they're leaving frame, like they don't even want to deal with what's happening right now. The weirdness of this wedding was it actually a wedding? Did they actually get married?
Sure, because it seems like it must be the case. I mean, but it doesn't matter to some extent. But yeah, I mean, they couldn't have faked the wedding in front of the grandmother.
Well, and the question was, do all of these people know that she's dying?
Right.
And her dad said maybe. Some of them do. I'm not sure how many of them do. So
one of the sequences I loved in particular was when Billie is running to try and stop the medical results from getting gotten, and it's like almost the story of the film where she starts out and she just runs out of energy, and it gives us a sense like maybe this is going to snap now, and it doesn't. But that running out of energy, that exhaustion, really such a strong image. And then for her to get there, and the gag plays through doubly. There's so much self-sacrifice. I thought that the some of the sequences where we had camera movement, this is one of those perfect examples of where the camera movement is integral and beautiful. And the driving sequence, especially the driving past the old neighborhood, we see that twice, just absolutely lovely. And the song, I thought the song choice, the hymn there was I mean, just moving. One of the things about America, which I also thought was really interesting, was that story about the key, right? Where they talk about the church, and they went to the church and they said you can, have the key, but and then Billie says that's not what America's all like, because she knows that she hasn't really been given that key because the fellowship's not hers.
Right.
And again, spoilers, boy, I could wreck everything. But so there's a little bit of like, this is the difficulty with America. It's a land of opportunity, but maybe all the opportunities aren't there. And there's all of this being said, but but it doesn't become a political film.
Right.
It remains in this story of family,
Yeah.
which is and really quite beautiful.
This was apparently based on director Lulu Wang, right? This was based on her life and her grandmother's life. And we get that clip at the end,
Right.
who I believe is her grandmother. And so that whole ha thing, right, was taken from her own grandmother, it seems. And so at the end of the film, and I wanted to talk about this for just a brief moment, Billy's walking down the street in New York surrounded by people who are living out their daily lives. She's still in this weird zone,
construction workers and
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Life
Really
is kind of
working
just
people.
keeps moving past her. And she stops and she screams ha, as if she's needing to release the toxic energy that her grandmother told her about. And then it cuts to China and we hear another ha, which I took as her grandmother doing the same thing over there. And apparently that entire routine works for her because she's still
still there,
still
right?
living 6 years later. So,
and interesting, like the birds fly away. There's some that bird symbolism we're just gonna have to go work through. Like it just feels like
I'm thinking about it now. They were all black crows or whatever they were. So this black toxin I took as leaving this
the body.
this living thing, this tree. And so that's kind of how I took it, at least. But there's another moment I wanted to talk about too. And it was when they were bringing all the food to the gravesite. I don't know if that is that must be an actual cultural thing. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about that. But I thought it was really humorous and really it was beautiful to watch because I don't know. I don't have many dead relatives, like
that is an amazing sentence. Just pause for a moment, folks. That's an amazing
I don't
sentence.
have many dead relatives, just my grandmother who passed away, right? But she's buried up in Connecticut. I'm down here in Pennsylvania. I don't get to go visit her grave. I never make it up to Connecticut. So, and I certainly wouldn't bring her a banana and leave it on her tombstone. So it's just interesting the different, like that's one of the cultural things that I loved seeing. And then it follows with Nina saying, I want to be cremated, spread my ashes into the ocean.
Don't
and
do this.
they tell her no.
Yeah.
What? They're trying to save her from this mindset, but then they don't necessarily respect her own wishes after her.
Yeah, and there's a lot of humor in there, and there's a lot. But one of the things I want to say about that, and we're short on car time.
Yeah,
there's
go
two
for
things
it.
I want to talk about. One is that in a way, it's talking about needing to hold on to your heredity. I just come back from Italy, went there. Right, I have Italian family. My wife has Italian family there. That idea of returning back to your roots.
Yeah.
And that you don't want your roots to be destroyed. Don't forget me. Don't scatter me to the sea.
Right.
I want you to still be there. I want to be able to connect to this. It's so rich and meaningful. And Lulu Wang saying something about her own feelings. But we're going to run out of time, and I want to say this so we can at least maybe touch it later.
Yeah.
Everyone in this movie is lying. And I just want to put that out there. This movie isn't about a lie. There's a lie that's central, but all of the characters lie. They lie about their smoking. They lie about not getting a fellowship. They lie about their drinking. They lie about their family relationships. Almost every character we're encountering has a lie that's trying to keep somebody else healthy.
Yeah.
Right? So the grandfather stopped smoking, but he didn't stop smoking. Father stopped smoking. Each person. And I thought it was masterful that we didn't get slammed over the head with that.
Yeah. Right. So subtly just tossed in there because I didn't pick up on everybody lying.
Everyone's
about their own
lying.
thing.
And
Yeah.
I mean, the doctor lies. The English-speaking doctor lies.
Right.
Over and over, people are
Well,
lying.
and the sister lies.
The sister lies.
You don't know what she's lying about specifically, but she says, "Don't worry about me, I'm fine." And I take that as like, no, she's not.
No, she's not.
Does
Exactly
she
right.
also have?
Yeah, well, and
cancer
she
or something,
certainly was in with the doctor, and she was there, and maybe, who knows? And this is this thing that we end up encountering. We don't even, we don't fully understand anything because we're being lied to in a way.
Right.
But no matter what, as each person lies, we discover these lies are being told because she said, what's the line that grandmother says? It's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Right.
And I don't buy that 100% as a moral position. But it certainly is a position, I understand that.
Yeah.
Kindness, compassion, love,
Right.
it really matters.
Yeah. Flash flood warning.
We do have a flash flood. We may not make it through the show. So, you know what? I'm going to hit this X because we want to see where we really are. Why don't we do a quick rating?
Yes. I'm throwing it way up I'm throwing it really high, like 9 to 10 range. Like I really loved this movie, and I'm still emotionally like I can feel that one. Wow.
The end of this film, as the music is playing.
Yeah.
I was devastated. Like really, I mean, devastated in the right way.
Yeah.
Right. Not.
Right. You weren't heartbroken. You were. Yeah.
But devastated. Like
You
there
were
was
moved.
so
You're
much,
emotionally
really
moved.
and in a place, and then of course AMC turned the lights on
I knew-
immediately. And I was like, I can't stand it. But
They didn't let me like mill in this weird pot.
such a
I'm
good
sitting
place
in,
of where I was.
I know. So it wasn't bad. Like it was like a really good like reflecting film. It made me realize like, I mean, there's multiple thoughts that cross my mind. I'm like, when I'm sitting on my deathbed, like, what am I gonna regret in life? What am I not gonna regret? What am I only gonna care about? And that thing will probably end up being family and like who's with me in that place. And hopefully that will be a very, very long time for now. But it makes me think about you. It makes me think about my parents. It makes me think about Steph. It makes me, think about mom, right? Like all of these things all at once. And how are you going to deal with that when that time comes?
And it's not your culture, and that's how we know the film is. The film is about culture and heredity, and it is about being Chinese.
Right.
But it's not. It universalizes in a way that makes it really worthwhile for anyone to watch.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm in the same boat. This is like a 9 or a 10 for me.
Yeah.
Way up on the scale. A movie I will watch again. A movie that I know will be a challenge. A movie I cannot wait to watch with my wife.
Yeah. Likewise. Likewise. Cool. We're going to take a break. We will see you guys, or you'll see us, really, and listen to us in just a few minutes when we return for our second half.
And hopefully we won't be in a car that's both steamy and hot and covered in rain.
Yeah.
So we'll be back.
All right. Awesome. Let's turn this car on.
You're listening to the Racking Focus podcast. Okay, we're back with our second portion of this podcast on The Farewell. Now, I searched a little bit for things, and I only found interviews really with the director, Lulu Wang, and just relating the movie to her family. What did you find? I want to know what you found first, and then I can...
Yeah, so I found 2 different articles about Lulu Wang and the family issue. Some really interesting information.
Mm-hmm.
And an article about Awkwafina talking about Crazy Rich Asians and this film, and the idea of traveling back to... China. So that it's a little bit of that. I looked at some review information too, so I have some frame of reference from the outside.
Yeah, maybe we can go through Rotten Tomatoes or something and see some critic reviews and some audience reviews, see if we agree with them. Do you like this film as much or more or less than you did right after seeing?
So there's 2 ways to approach that. The first way is to say that as a film, yes, for sure I do. Mm-hmm. Finding out this backstory of the movie, which I really do like to go in without, makes it even more interesting cinematic experience. And the story of the making of this film and how it developed was really interesting. What's funny to me is the This American Life sequence that this was was based on. I remember hearing now.
Oh, gotcha.
Now in
okay,
reference,
so you listened to it.
I listened to This American Life, not religiously, but with a regularity. And when this came out, it was one of the periods of times where I was listening to it. And I remember the story now.
Cool.
And it's fascinating.
Cool. Well, that's how apparently she found a producer. Somebody was listening. She searched for Chinese producers and American producers, and nobody wanted to take on her story. And when they did, they wanted it to be either more Americanized or more Chinese based, and she stuck to her guns and said no to both ends, and wanted to make the film her way, and that meant that she wasn't going to get a producer, and so she was stuck doing this NPR, This American Life, and somebody found her through there, which I thought was really interesting and a great. I mean, she was encouraging people in this podcast that I listened to, which is another NPR podcast, and to be honest, one of the most boring podcasts I've ever had the chance to listen to. But every time Lulu Wang spoke, I was really intrigued. And she just wanted to encourage young filmmakers to stick to the movie that you want to make and don't let other people dictate. And it might take a little bit longer for you to get to that point to be able to make the film, but in the end, it'll be worth it. And she wants people to really let's let young filmmakers and just indie filmmakers in general, no-namers, make these movies that they want to make without bombarding them with your input and trying to make things more political or Americanized or whatever country you're in. Stop pushing your own agenda into their films.
Yeah, and it feels like some of what they were trying to do with her was to make the film more, I'm not going to say commercially successful, but more palatable to some predetermined, stereotypical social construct we have in film. So like something that resonated more with an audience that might like Grey's Anatomy, or a more traditional rom-com, and she didn't want to do that, and it makes a lot of sense. In fact, I would say that that's one of the reasons why the movie's so strong.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, originally, from what I heard, the producers wanted to make Billy the one who was getting married because it would have raised the stakes. Because you think about what are the stakes in this film, and it's just, I hope nobody spills the beans to grandma. And those are really the only stakes, or maybe her death in the middle of their visit was another stake,
or her death when they're away.
Right.
But for us, these are stakes that we need to just be conscious are actually legitimate stakes.
That's what I was going to say. Is there stakes in someone's real life? Just because we're watching a film doesn't mean that we kind of keep adding these layers of problems, right? Like, this is a big enough problem all on its own. We don't need Billy now marrying some random person that she's never met, all to pretend, all to get over to China to see her grandmother.
Well, if the story's about the wedding, the story's not about
the grandmother.
The grandmother, and the relationship, and the relationship between the Americanized Chinese and the Chinese culture. You end up turning into a movie that's about marriage culture, which to some extent is what Crazy Rich Asians does.
Right.
And Crazy Rich Asians moves towards that idea of the conflict between the individual people as opposed to the conflict between cultures. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a vastly different thing and a bigger, more melodramatically capable film.
Right. I'm glad that she stuck to her guns because we wouldn't have gotten the film that we watched if she let the producers really influence her project. We wouldn't have gotten the amazing soundtrack. We wouldn't have gotten there's a whole bunch of things in this film that we wouldn't have gotten if she kind of let people take over control.
The other thing I would say that I learned from these stories, and I think this really works, is telling your story is important. You know, getting out on this American life and telling the story is a crucial part. I would recommend for people to go hunt that segment down and watch it after they've watched the film and see how the two formats can be different. And so getting your story out, formalizing it in a way will get people to pay attention in a way that the 30-second elevator pitch is potentially damaging to your film because it leaves the empty spaces that a producer or someone could then fill with stuff that takes the film out of your own
She essentially
control.
made a proof of concept in audio form, right? That's what she did. She told this same story for the most part. Things changed.
With real interviews, right?
Yes. But, she made a proof of concept audio podcast rather than making a proof of concept short film, which is the way that the main film that comes to mind, Whiplash, major proof of concept. They, I believe, premiered at Toronto International Film Festival, and based on that short film, Damien Chazelle funded the project and got backers to create Whiplash, which was obviously Oscar nominated and a great movie. But a proof of concept is important today for producers to come in, understand the project, and back the project and pay money. All these films cost so much money today. But you're right. I think your story is important, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of stories out there that need to be told and that can be told. And it's just finding the right way to share that story.
And what's interesting to me, too, about that whole process is you get to work your story through once.
Right.
People really think you want to tell your story once and be done. And there's tons of times where I've finished a piece of theater, and when I'm done the work, I'm like, oh, we could have done these 6 other things as I'm in performance. And so 6 years later, you remount that production. It's not at all the same production. It's both I've matured, my actors have matured, whatever, but ultimately there's things I learned from the process. And the process of making the short film or the audio version of that piece can teach you what your real film can do or show you the pitfalls that you can avoid.
Well, so it feels like a little bit like you're getting into transmedia a little bit of can The Farewell be a great audio journey to listen to in the car? Can it be an amazing film? We know that it is already an amazing film. Can it also be a novel? Like, would it work as a novel? Would it work as a a graphic novel? What else would it work as? Would it work as a series of blogs? Would it be good in the written form, right? So that's something that Tarantino is really heavy on, is he wants all of his scripts to read like a novel, like a book. So the prose is important to him. It's just how you're going to tell your story and figuring out as you're telling your story once, twice, 3 times, how you can get better at telling this story. The most interesting thing that I found while listening to some of these podcasts and interviews was that casting was apparently really difficult.
Yeah.
Because the Chinese actors, even though we've never heard of them, are working all of the time, and their rates are incredibly high. I did not realize this, but apparently Lulu Wang had to go to, don't know her name, not even going to try and pronounce her name, but whoever played Nai Nai, the grandmother. Apparently major actress over there, working all of the time. Actress. Big deal. Never heard of her before, never seen her before this film. And she was too expensive. She was out of budget, and she had to plead and beg with the woman who played Nai Nai to be in the movie and shoot the film, because she said, there's nobody else out there that I've found that can play my grandmother. You're playing my grandmother, and that's it. You're it. And can we work something out? And she did, and she replied with something along the lines of, you are the same age as my grandchildren, and I would love to do this for you and be part of the film. So back to telling stories, right? Like this grandmother, this older actress, found value in Lulu Wang's story, telling that story and being a part of this journey, both for the American culture that it's showcasing, but also for the Chinese culture. And merging those two cultures together, I think, was probably a really significant thing for her to do. Like, she really wanted to do that.
Well, and she does it in her own hometown, right? She goes and shoots in her own hometown, and you can sense, or her Nai Nai's hometown, the town of the story, right? That the real story, and the aunt is the real aunt.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really, and the conversation of, I don't think you should play this part because it's too close to you, and she's like, no, it's therapy. It's the way you get out of it.
Yeah. And that's what Wong has said about her journey making this film, is that this allowed me to grieve and mourn with my grandmother, allowed me to go back to China and spend more time with my grandmother, and she's still alive, which is stinking incredible. So being able to hide this film from her is just amazing.
Well, that's what's amazing to me, is that she's on set because they're in the town and they're doing things to make sure she doesn't understand what the film's about.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really interesting to me is that by doing it in that hometown, and my wife has family in Italy, right? And so when we go back there to the town near Milan, there's a character to that town that is very difficult to recreate, but you can recreate it physically, but the sensibility of the town is what you get from the location work. And so all the people in these Chinese actors are all in a place that has resonance that supports the acting process. And I'm a big fan of site-specific theater. I'm a big fan of site-specific film because it does, especially these small films, because they make a difference. It doesn't matter where we do the Avengers. You get what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
You can do the New York sequences of the Avengers in LA.
It's an immersion for these actors, the process to feel like, all of these Chinese actors, Asian actors, they're saying, I am back in, whether I was born there or not, back in the country that my parents came from or my grandparents came from. This is my culture. This is my place. And even though I haven't spent much time here, this is where I come from. Generations of ancestors have come from this place. And so being able to go back to that location and I think of, when you were talking about this a second ago, I thought of the issue with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, the difference. And for some reason, I decided to put on The Hobbit the other day because I felt the need for adventure, but I wasn't ready to sit down and watch Frodo.
Oh, you put The Hobbit on because you felt the need for adventure?
I put The Hobbit on because I felt the need, but a story I know. I know.
Okay.
But I've seen Lord of the Rings a million times, so I was like, I just want to watch. Maybe The Hobbit wasn't as bad as it was. I made it halfway through, and I was like, I need to shut this off. But I don't feel like I'm immersed in their world in The Hobbit in the same way that I was in Lord of the Rings, because of the soundstage that they were shooting on for The Hobbit versus shooting actually in New Zealand on location in most of those places. It was just different for the audience, and I'm sure completely different for the actors.
Yeah, Aquafina says that specifically, and I'm just going to look at this in the
Yeah, go
article
for
real
it.
quick. Says that going back to Singapore for Crazy Rich Asians just made Singapore a beautiful place, but going here to China is, first of all, they shot in a real wedding venue.
Right.
Like
real banquet hall.
A real banquet hall that's there that would have a wedding just like this. She's eating in restaurants that are the same restaurants as her grandmother who lived close to this location.
Yeah.
And that resonance gives things meaning from an actor standpoint.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people who were concerned, production people, about Aquafina taking the role, that she wasn't going to be capable of because of the rap world, the comedic world, whatever, the more rough, less subtle performances. But the reality of this helps build that, gives support to an actor. And she's a good actor, so we're not going to
it gave her a foundation to kind of build upon, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, this location thing really mattered. So I think that there's a resonance, a reality to this that's really rich. And I talked a little bit about in my second look, my second alternate angle at Once Upon a Time in America. That movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Oh my goodness gracious, the Leone thing's killing me. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that those characters don't feel like they're in a real world.
Right.
They feel like they're real. The world feels real, but it isn't a real world. Here, we know it's a real world. And when we watch the end and those birds fly away, they're real birds in a real place. It's not just metaphor, and all of that really is a powerful way of affecting us as people watching the film.
Great. Would you still rate it as high as you rated it before?
So I would rate it just as high as I rated it before.
Yeah.
It's a movie I'm going to watch. I said to my wife, I can't wait till she sees it. And part of the reason I can't wait till she sees it is because I can't wait for her to see the resonance with going home to your family. That's a universal story that I'm excited for her to get to watch. We're probably not going to see it in the theater.
Right.
We'll probably wait till it comes on some home
Netflix or
form, whatever, whoever's going to take it. And watch it there. But still, it's so strong that I really want her to see it, and I loved it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm still gonna rate this 9 to a 10, like so high. I want to hop on to Rotten Tomatoes here. Critics are getting, like, just in general, people hate critics, right? People are just really not enjoying movie critics. Did the timer not start?
The timer did start. I don't know what's going on. We're just gonna cross our fingers.
Anyway, critics are like looked at as people who are just annoying, snobbish, and they really aren't right ever.
Right.
When in actuality, critics are right a lot of the times, and the audience is wrong. In this case, thankfully, the critics and the audience score line up. They're 10% off. The critics gave this a 99%. It's 99% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score is 89% fresh. So it's very, very close.
Well, and that makes some sense, right? There's people walking into the theater and they're struggling with a movie that's all in Cantonese. There's people walking in the theater, they're struggling with pacing,
right?
Who think it's something else, and so you're going to get a lower audience score.
A little bit lower, right?
Because
but what makes me happy is that the audience still loved this movie and is giving it its stamp of approval. Because what that does is it increases the amount of films like this that are going to get made because of the audience score. Like, forget the critics for a second. The audience liking this is such a huge deal.
Well, this is making money, and it's the breakout indie hit of the year.
Yeah,
that's great for this kind of movie,
right?
And it's not a small movie.
No,
it has it has some scale. It has a lot of characters. It's not 3 actors on the screen, but it is an intimate movie. And I think it's great that we'll see more of that.
I want to read one negative review.
Great. I'm anxious to hear that.
He gave it. I thought it was a 1 star at first, but it's actually a half star.
Oh my goodness!
It's 0.5 stars out of 5. They said, I knew the plot outline before going in, so it had nothing to do with my rating. This was one of the most tedious, uninspired movies I have ever seen. Everything was in slow motion, with depressing cello interludes, interminable family meals more boring than most of mine as a child, a good deal of wailing. With a better writer, something memorable might have been done with this theme.
Woof.
What a wow.
Well, and like missing the mark over and over and over again.
Completely missing the point of the film, right? Completely missing what it's about. I want to read one more.
Yeah, I applaud. I just responded. I applaud the slow motion.
The slow motion only happened, I believe,
it's at that
one
end
time.
sequence.
Only one
Yeah,
time. When she was walking through, she was center frame. She was walking through.
Well, when the whole family walks at the end,
Oh, you're
it's in
right.
slow motion.
You're right.
But that's still not a movie of slow motion, and maybe it's about pace.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought the meals were actually really well shot.
Yeah, I could watch them eat all day.
Yeah.
It's strange. Al says 1 out of 5 stars. Rotten ick. If you want to be depressed, go see this movie. Neither uplifting or lighthearted. Let's pause here. It's not uplifting or lighthearted necessarily, but it's about a grieving family dealing with the mother. But it does give you a feeling of inspiration and empathy towards this family, but also towards your own family. Like it's a heavy film, but at the same time, we didn't leave depressed. I don't think.
And we're grounded in Billy's journey, and Billy's journey is one that is of empowerment, that is of strength, and to some great extent of this thing that people missed, like love,
right?
Not lust, not
yeah.
fake romance, not
It's true love,
infatuation. Like
yeah.
it's about real love, but real love isn't necessarily inspiring or uplifting.
Right.
It's powerful
Right.
and fulfilling.
Yeah. It
and
takes on
that's-
different roles and emotions sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, to continue, no review says 80% of the movie is subtitles. So this guy sounds like he was upset about having to
makes
read.
sense.
You'd be better off pulling your finger and toenails off than seeing this film.
Oh my goodness.
People must be
gracious.
nuts to rate this as high as it is. False advertising. Disagree 100% on.
Yeah, and
on a lot of that.
I understand the challenge of going into a movie you don't know is subtitled. But one of the things to be aware of is it's the challenge of the film. I wanted to talk about language, so let me do that while you're looking through.
Yeah.
There's a bit of conversation in the film about whether or not Billy is capable of speaking Cantonese.
Right.
And for us,
is it Cantonese or Mandarin? What are they?
I think it's Cantonese, but I could be wrong.
I wasn't sure.
I read it in a review, and I think it said Cantonese because it surprised me.
Gotcha.
But one of the things that there's this conversation about her being a bad speaker, right? We don't know that. We're
it sounded
American
fine to
audience.
me, yeah.
Exactly. And she is a bad speaker. Her pronunciation's really bad, apparently.
Right.
And in some places, that's what makes it real and true.
Yeah.
You learn a language artificially as a second generation, and then you go back and my wife going back to speak in Italy, everyone knows we're from America, as well as she may blow out some language. She can speak things
Better than I ever could.
Yeah, but still,
you still know based on the dialect
they
that
know,
you're using. They
right?
know. Yeah.
And they know that my mother-in-law, who speaks relatively fluently, is speaking a dialect and and learned from a parent, and it's very unique. And so one of the things about the movie is that language is an issue. And so for us as an audience member, especially English-speaking audience member, confronting that language is part of what the movie's letting us experience.
Right.
What does it mean to go back to a country to try and talk to people and deal with people whose language you don't understand? And we see 3 levels of that, 4 levels really. We see the native speakers, grandmom and the aunt and the people around them.
Right.
We see the Japanese family and the American family, both who've lost some measure of their language, those adults.
Right.
And then we see the kids, Billy and I'm going to say the fiance, fiance speaks nothing,
Right.
and Billy
the fiance, yes,
speaks roughly. How speaks like Billy does, and there's these different places, and we're in that. So as you're reading the text, you're reading a translation.
Yeah.
I'm confident we're reading a translation that's legitimate, right? It's not being subtitled, like old kung fu films where they were subtitled by someone who didn't care.
Yeah. It's subtitled by the director who wanted that specific language to come through the
exactly.
the film.
But that subtitling means we understand the difficulty of language. We're in the same boat as our main character. We don't understand what's going on. And there were moments where we didn't get a subtitle.
Right.
Either because we should have learned the word where there was a gag,
I know,
or because it was an intimate moment that we didn't need to have, right?
Right.
And those things are really interesting to me.
Yeah, because words draw your eye from the emotion on screen to the word at the bottom, and so you miss out on the frame. And so if it wasn't on screen, it's because they wanted us to be looking at the frame rather than at the word, right?
Or they expected us to learn the language because we're there, and that's a commitment we need to make when we're going to return to these old worlds.
Right.
and or whatever. When I say old world, the old world, the American New World, old world idea. So that to me, the language portion of it's really interesting. And for someone like Awkwafina, who comes from a very Americanized, urbanized language, right?
Yeah.
That's where the roots of her voice are. To have her speaking this other language is really fascinating for me as a viewer, and I can imagine frustrating for someone,
Right.
as well.
And I heard that she didn't speak this language beforehand. She had to learn this language for this film. That's a commitment right there as well.
It's not an easy language.
Not an easy language. I wouldn't want to learn it. All right, so I was gonna maybe let's read some critic reviews, but I don't think that's worth doing because they're all great. So
Yeah.
everybody's just praising the film. I'm scrolling through and it's all fresh. There's nothing rotten on there. Yeah, that's really all I have, other than the last thing that I find interesting is that the Chinese name for this movie is not The Farewell. It's Don't Tell Her.
Yeah, there you go.
So, you have anything else to add?
Well, yeah, a couple quick, just generalized thoughts.
Go for it.
You know, going to see a movie like this is important because it's small, intimate, needs to be made. We want to support that. But it also says something else to us. And you said something about the Chinese grandmother actress. There's a pile of actors in the world that we don't know.
Yeah.
And engaging in international cinema does two things. One, it lets you be good at subtitles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So I watch a lot of international film.
Right.
The subtitles don't bother me. I understand how to catch the frame and catch the frame.
It doesn't bother me at all. And I forget that this movie was primarily in a Chinese language. I completely forget, like thinking back to the film, I'm remembering the film because I'm hearing them speak through their language, but it's translating into my ear in English because I'm reading the subtitles. And forever, when I remember this movie, it's going to be in English.
Right.
Right.
And so your experience is one of your own language in the international cinema, and that's great. And I think that we should remember to go do that, to practice that skill.
Yeah.
The person who's mad about the subtitles is the person who isn't used to subtitles.
Right.
And the reason you want subtitles over the dub is because the dub is going to either be bothersome because it doesn't match,
gonna mess with
or
your head. Yeah.
wildly misrepresentation of the language, or it removes all the emotion. Like
Right.
these actors are doing work. I want to see their work.
Yeah.
But the second thing is we have a lot of actors we need to go get to know. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's important to go and hunt down when you see an actor in a film like this, their work, and go watch some more of their work.
Yeah.
To, first of all, see the quality of their acting. I've seen Awkwafina now in 2 films, right? And
Right.
I'm now a fan of that work. I think it's great to do that. And so, you know, her mother is an Australian Chinese actress. I want to go find out work from that actor and explore. And so that's like just a commissioning.
Right.
As we get to the end of
it
this.
opens up a vast world for more films to watch, more people to watch, and it makes me optimistic for the future of cinema. This movie, like we mentioned before, like this opens the door to so many more indie films. A24 that distributed this movie is just doing spectacular work finding films
right
and
across the
supporting
board.
filmmakers. I'm excited for The Lighthouse coming up later this year. That looks like it was shot on 16 millimeter film in black and white, starring Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and I'm just like really excited for that. And seeing Midsummer earlier,
There we go.
that is our time. We have like 3 minutes, so let's wrap up in a second. But I'm excited for what they're doing and for the future of cinema as we kind of battle between the Hobbs and Shaw franchise movies of the world versus The Farewell that we're seeing less than a week later. Both movies are successful movies. Both movies have a very distinct audience, but one maybe should take priority now over the other. I think the indie films need to. I think people are wanting them. I think people are wanting these original stories. They're getting tired of. I mean, there's a reason that there's movies that are failing. There's a reason that Justice League and I was just gonna say a whole bunch of DC films, but a whole bunch of DC films don't work, and it's because of story. So.
Yeah, and you know, to say finally, like from my perspective, going and exploring these other films from a filmmaker perspective is about styles too.
Yeah.
And when you get to watch other actors in different acting styles, you get to expand your capacity both to direct actors and to see different kinds of framing.
Yeah.
You know, Kurosawa changes the way we see film when we see his work, and you know, Leone changes the way Tarantino sees film, and as a result, we want those people's images, their vision from their culture to be in our eyes.
Yeah.
And this is a really interesting way of blending that. It's a good transitional element.
So in short, you're saying go watch more movies, whether it's international or homemade, not homemade, but Americanized Hollywood films, right?
And to say, in addition, that Lulu Wang's film is a great bridge for that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it
definitely
is. It
told
is.
from an American stylistic perspective.
Right.
It is definitely an indie film,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it
yeah.
is entrenched in culture
Right.
and different acting styles that really expand for us.
Right.
Certainly those Chinese actors, the Chinese homegrown actors, are acting differently,
Mm-hmm.
and they're finding a bridge, and it's a great way for us to get there.
Great. Well, let's wrap up here
Yeah,
real
good.
quick. Guys, thank you so much for
here we
listening.
go. It's the hard part.
This is the hard part. Let's just say, find us on Twitter at PodFocus, Instagram at Racking Focus Podcast, Gmail. Please send us some emails. We would love to talk to you, communicate with you guys. Send us questions, send us your films, send us what films we should watch at rackingfocuspod@gmail.com.
And don't forget our Instagram at Racking Focus Podcast.
Yep.
There's little bits of pictures. We're starting to do more work on our Instagram account, and it's an easy way to access us, especially from the lives we can post when we're getting ready to shoot, so you know what films we're reviewing that week, and you can comment.
Yep. And lastly, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. We would love the 5-star review, whether you loved us or hate us. Just leave that 5-star, and you can maybe write in the comments why you hate us. Either way, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Racking Focus Podcast.